Further to the video that I made yesterday concerning wants versus needs and Benatar's double bind, and I still am quite certain that he has constructed an elaborate double bind by what is implied in what he has to say, not in what he actually out and out says. Now, an example of this, and again, I'm quite certain that this comment was made in good faith and in all sincerity, and Fede said that I neither need nor want to be here, and we can say the same thing about the non-existent, about potential human beings, if we want to use that placeholder, I guess it was, the human equivalent of zero. Okay, so they neither need nor want to exist. I get it, but they're not averse to existing either, and they don't have a negative need to not exist. You can't demonstrate a need to not exist. There are such a thing as negative needs. Like, for example, I need to not be deprived of food. You can look at it that way. But you can't demonstrate that the non-existent need to remain in a state of non-existence. So again, if you can't demonstrate a need, which is kind of implicit in what Benatar is saying, the implication is, of course, that since you can't demonstrate a need, then you don't have any right to do it. But again, he doesn't come out and say that, which again makes me think along the lines of a double bind, because a double bind gives you one injunction while implying another one, and the two of them are impossible to sort of carry out. Now again, Artificer in a comment stated that I was portraying Benatar as a scheming person. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not portraying him like that. In fact, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I assume that he's sincere. I don't think that you have to actually deliberately create a double bind. You may actually believe that you are subject to one. See, that's the interesting thing about the double bind. It's not so much just a dilemma that you sort of set for people. For it to actually exist, somebody has to swallow it. Somebody has to actually go along with it. I don't know if David Benatar is either going along with a double bind that he believes fundamentally exists, or if he's just invented it to mess with people's heads. I don't care. That's the motive fallacy. I'll never know what his motives are. But what I'm saying is he is actually, in my opinion, either creating or perpetuating a double bind. He's sort of implying that a need is a requirement for existence, but he doesn't say so. And he's also implying that there is a need for non-existence, but he doesn't say that either. Again, it's metacommunicationally or metacommunicatively, I don't know how you would say this. He actually is making one case, and he's also making the opposite case at the same time, implying that we have to meet both conditions. Now it's kind of a trap. It's kind of I call it a combustive situation. Either that, or you have to sort of look at the dilemma by stepping away from it and taking a larger view. You know, you may be looking at the blind man and the elephant again. It may not actually be a fundamental paradox or a problem. You could sort of say maybe needs and wants are not necessary preconditions for action. Maybe, or maybe they're both necessary preconditions for actions. Let me put it this way. I mentioned yesterday in reference to a TV series from the 1960s, The Prisoner. They want to know, his jailers want to know why he resigned, and I said he simply resigned because he wanted to, and that's it. And they didn't understand that, and it drove them crazy. They thought, why would he resign from us, from this wonderful civilization, or why would he make a stand as an individual? Why would he do this? Why would he want to do something on his own that doesn't actually conform with the utilitarian expectations of society? And I would say the same thing, say, for example, about, since we're talking about it, about reproducing. Why did you reproduce? Because I wanted to. And again, is that clearly understood when you answer that? Like, you can't contradict that. You can say that that's not a morally sufficient answer, and you can try and make a case for that, but you're going to run into things like guilt, shame, all this other stuff that, we've already argued to death, if you ask me. Or you're going to have to somehow demonstrate that wants are less important than needs. Now, I'm not sure of that. I'm not sure that our wants are less important than needs. I'll put it this way. Again, I ask this. Is it essential characteristic of human beings to have wants? To have desires? To want things? Is it essential characteristic? Is it human to have wants, to have drives, to have things that you want to do? And I would say yes, it is. Desire is a characteristic, essential characteristic of humans. You either have positive or negative desires. You can say that, as you say in your comment, Fede, you don't need or want to be here. But one would also say you can't demonstrate a need to not be here, but you can demonstrate a want not to be here. See the problem? We're sort of getting into territory where wants and needs get blurred, aren't we? And as I say, it's a dangerous kind of thing that we're playing, a game that we're playing here, because ultimately what we're doing is we're questioning the entire notion of the rights culture that has evolved in our society over the last couple of thousand years. You have the right to do certain things because, it's assumed that that's absolutely essential to your fundamental nature as a human being. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all that kind of thing. Now, how does that... It's assumed that we need these things, right? How does that differ from wanting these things? Okay, what's the difference between me wanting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and needing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I don't think that that's clearly delineated. Again, you have to have certain parameters to decide what's the difference between a need and a want, right? But again, if you challenge those parameters, then the whole thing starts to sort of fade to nothing. And as I say, what we're doing right now is we're well on the way towards sort of fundamentally undermining the entire thinking behind the rights culture that we as a society have evolved over the last few thousand years. Benatar is essentially saying that we don't have, in my opinion, that we don't have the right to be what we are. We don't have the right to be humans. Because it is a characteristic of humans to have wants, to have desires. And he's saying that we have to sort of check those desires. We have to stop those wants. Again, I said before, all that does it creates a pressure cooker in the organism. It creates inner conflict. It doesn't really resolve anything. The only thing that I can say in defense of that position is that each of us as individuals might be able to have a capacity to reduce our own desires. But desire reduction is a tricky thing. How do you reduce your desire for something? That is a very good question, if you ask me. How do you actually deal with the fact that you have desires? You either transcend your desires or you repress them. I would have to say that Benatar advocates repression. Benatar advocates declaring war on our fundamental nature. And I've mentioned in a gazillion other videos, that's a war that cannot be won. We are what we are. Benatar seems to think that we have an obligation to change our fundamental nature. I would say that we may not even have the capacity to do that. And he's going to have to demonstrate his right to demand that we change our fundamental nature. Furthermore, we have to ask ourselves, do we have the right to change our own fundamental nature. Does Benatar have the right to ask me to change my fundamental nature, to change the fact that I have wants, that I have desires? He's going to have to demonstrate that he has that right. He's going to have to demonstrate to me that I have the obligation to change my fundamental nature. And he's going to have to also demonstrate that I even have the right to change my fundamental nature. Who owns my fundamental nature? Who owns that? Good question, isn't it? I'd like to hear someone's response to that. Who owns human nature?